Hello everyone, and thank you all for your insightful comments in the previous video about the sound being too low. I raised it somewhat for this video, so hopefully you won't have to go all out in raising your volume on your device that you're using to watch the video. Now, it's a game from the final round of the Cote d'Ivoire Rapid Tournament in Abidjan. Wei Yi faces Magnus Carlsen, and so far Carlsen is having an excellent tournament, like the perhaps 3 previous tournaments, and on the third day he defeated Egyptian Grandmaster Bassem Amin and drew against Ding Liren, and now he has an opportunity to be the first player in chess history to break 2900 rating in rapid chess. Before the tournament even started, they said that he needed 7.5 out of 9, which is basically 6 wins and 3 draws, and to achieve this, he needs to beat Wei Yi with the black pieces. So, without further ado, let's check out the game. It's really a crazy game. Not really sure what to say about it. More than that, I do hope you enjoy it. Like we said, Wei Yi has the white pieces, and he opens with e4. We have c5, knight to f3, knight to c6, and here Wei Yi is not interested to test Carlsen's Sveshnikov, so we have c3, the Alpin variation. We have queen to a5 by Carlsen. If d4 comes, then of course there will be this pin. And we have knight to a3, preparing knight to c4 to kick away the queen. We have e6. Let me just check if I've lowered the volume of the pieces, since I don't remember, so you don't have to worry about that. Yeah, I think it's fine. We have e6 and now knight to c4 as planned, kicking the queen away. And then there are 23 games in the database with this exact same position, and in all 23 queen to c7 was played. Here Carlsen goes queen to d8. It's a new move, and already amazingly from move 6 we have a completely new game. Okay. With d4 as planned, this pin no longer exists, and now that Carlsen's queen supports the d pawn from the d8 square, Carlsen also advances the pawn all the way. We have d5, e captures, pawn captures, and now knight c to e5. And here, of course, Carlsen just continues development. Bishop d6, we have bishop to e3, Wei Yi does the same, and now c4. We have b3. The standard idea: when your opponent advances a pawn like this, you want to attack it with your flank pawn. We have c captures, pawn captures, and now knight g to e7, preparing to develop the light square bishop to f5. And well, it's a nice setup for black. Bishop to d3, bishop to f5 as planned, both players castle, and here we have bishop to f4, increasing the activity of this bishop. And if we look at the position now, it's a pretty equalish position, but white always will be better here, as not only does he have more control in the center, he also has a semi-open file for his rook. So Carlsen decides for bishop captures on e5. We have knight captures on e5, knight captures on e5, and now bishop captures on f5. And here you have to decide: do you want to move the knight, or do you want to capture this bishop? If knight captures bishop, then d captures on e5. Well, you could try d4 to get rid of your isolated pawn, but it doesn't work, because queen d3 attacks the knight. Once the knight is defended, now you just kick it away, g4, and you will win back. Not back, just win the d4 pawn, and of course white will be better here, up a pawn in a bishop against a knight. Game. So after bishop captures on f5, Carlsen goes knight back to g6, and now bishop to g5, pinning the knight, not allowing to capture on f7. And here Carlsen goes queen to c7, forces a trade, because now the bishop on f5 is still under attack, and also the queen is attacking the c3 pawn, which is a weak pawn. It's a backwards pawn. Once you get rid of it, then the b3 pawn is also weak, so you don't want to allow this. Wei Yi goes bishop captures on g6 with knight captures on g6, and now just queen to f3, defending the c3 pawn, but also putting pressure on the d5 pawn. We have queen to d7, saying, okay, for the moment I will defend this. And then now comes rook to a5, attacking the pawn here. And now there are a few ways you could deal with this. You could defend it by going something like f6, kick the bishop away, and then go knight e7, where the knight and queen all together defend the d5 pawn. Or you could play what Carlsen played, b5. It prevents the rook from now attacking the d5 pawn, but and makes it very inactive, but it also allows this rook f to a1 move, which really takes control of the a file. So it will be very hard to keep defending on the queen side. We have h6 by Carlsen, bishop back to d2, and now comes rook f to e8. Taking the open e file, as Wei Yi decided to take the semi-open a file. We have queen to d3 now with a double attack against the b5 pawn, and here Carlsen defends it with a very nice tactic. Carlsen finds a6, and it's a really cool line because it basically gives a pawn, but you will get so much activity for it. Well, you'll just have to see what happens. Wei Yi captures it. We have rook captures on a6, rook captures on a6, rook captures on a6, and now, of course, knight to f4, which is really a powerful move. Already you can see that ideas like queen g4, queen g2 are coming, knight e2 check becomes possible. The queen is under attack. Bishop, of course, cannot capture due to this rook e1, where you would lose the queen. And it's just a very nice position for black. So giving up a pawn but gaining a lot of activity. We have queen to f3 by Wei Yi, and now queen to f5. Again, a wonderful move where the knight is still off limits. If queen captures, then just queen b1 check. Bishop blocks, rook e1 again will be checkmate. So after this queen to f5 move, we have rook to a1. Wei Yi sees that he does have to defend the weak back rank, and now comes knight to e2 check, king to f1, and now queen to c2. And this is where the fun starts, as Wei Yi has to decide how to deal with this. There's no good way to defend the bishop on d2. If you go bishop e3, then you start losing pawns on the queen side, but even though it's not all that favorable for white, it is well, it is probably not queen c3, but knight captures on c3. You don't want to hang the knight. But it is the best line of defense for white. For example, g3 makes some room for your king. You will lose yet another pawn on the queen side, but at least you can start playing the game once again. Let's say knight e4. White will threaten checkmate here with queen f7, queen g7, knight f6. Black has to go back a little bit, and now Wei Yi will have to figure out how to deal with the passed b pawn. But Wei Yi isn't interested in playing a slightly worse position against world champion, so he decides for queen captures on e2. He gives up the queen for a knight and a rook and says, I will try to create a fortress. And as well, everyone knows Magnus Carlsen doesn't believe in fortresses. He says, okay, challenge accepted. We have rook captures on e2, king captures on e2, and now you could grab the b3 pawn immediately. First, Carlsen tests Wei Yi to see what's going on. Whether he will defend the g2 pawn or not. He does. We have king f1, and now Carlsen repeats. We have king back to e2, queen captures on b3, and now comes rook to c1, just defending the c3 pawn once again, and saying, okay, you have a queen, but I have a bishop and a rook, plus 5 pawns each. I can hold this. So let's see what happens. Carlsen goes queen c4 check. We have king to e3, and now comes queen to c7, going after the h2 pawn. F4 blocking, and now queen to e7 check. King to f2, and now comes queen to e4. So the black queen gets the most active square on the board, that is the e4 square, and now white just has to, keep everything intact, not allow Carlsen to make any progress. We have rook to e1, queen to d3, and now rook to e2. Everything is defended from white's perspective, and you have to really decide what to do here. You could go for something like b4, saying, okay, you grab that pawn, then I'll grab this pawn. But after c captures and queen captures on d4 with check, bishop to e3, you could grab this one, but it's going to be a bit harder to get this pawn rolling all the way. So Carlsen decides for a different plan. First, he wants to get his king into the game, and he wants to improve the pawn structure on the king's side. We have f6, making room for the king to enter the game. King e1, of course, white just repeats. King f7, we have rook to e3, queen b1 check, king to f2, and now comes h5. We have h3 by Wei Yi, h4 by Carlsen, limiting the mobility of Wei Yi's pieces and king. Bishop to e1, and now just king to g6. We have rook to f3, with maybe ideas of pushing f5, and then maybe some bishop to d2 can create some tricks against Carlsen's king, but just king to f5, blocking the pawn, and again increasing the activity of Carlsen's king. We have king e2, queen to e4 check, king back to f1, and now finally that now everything is, the position of Carlsen's king has increased. We have b4 as planned. Now the d4 pawn will become weak. C captures on b4, we have queen captures on d4, and now bishop captures on h4. So Wei Yi grabs another pawn, but queen to c4 check with king to g1, and now queen captures on b4. So this is the line Carlsen preferred to the one that we've shown that also creates a passed d pawn, but now he has a more active king, and well, Wei Yi's pieces aren't all in front of the passed d pawn. King f1 with queen to c4 check, king to g1, and now queen to e2. With bishop to f2, blocking the d-pawn, but it doesn't really block the d-pawn. This is what Carlsen had in mind, just d4, and now you will not be able to prevent d3, d2, and d1, so you have to capture it. Bishop captures on d4, but now queen d1 check, king h2, and now queen captures on d4. So the passed pawn is no more, but white lost the bishop. So now it's queen and 2 pawns against a rook and 3 pawns. Wei Yi still trying to create some sort of a fortress for Carlsen not to be able to penetrate. Rook to f1, just repeating. g6 now with rook to f3, and now with queen to d2. Rook back to f1 by Wei Yi, now comes king to e4 with rook to f3, and here queen to e2. And now this is the idea. If you're not careful, let's say you try something like king to h1, then Carlsen will just play queen captures rook. You don't need a queen anymore, captures, king h2, and now it's a completely winning king and pawn endgame that, well, white would immediately resign. So we have rook to g3, Wei Yi rather tries to give up a pawn for the g6 pawn, but Carlsen just defends it. Queen to h5, saying I'm gonna win this pawn later. Rook g4, not allowing it, and now king to e3. And it was in fact in this move, in this position on move 60, that Wei Yi didn't resign the game, but rather he lost on time. He ran out of time, but it is a completely winning position for Carlsen. Here, if you try something like, well, there's really nothing to try. You could go king g1 or something, but then you get f5 and the rook has to go away. We could show one of the lines. Let's say king g1, f5, rook to g3. Let's say you try and give a check, king captures on f4, rook to f3 check, king to e4, and now rook to f1. We have queen to e2, and now you could go, let's say, rook to f3, or rook to f3, but then we go into the same line, captures, and then it's again winning king and pawn endgame. But the point is that now the rook would have to finally move, let's say rook a1, and now the rook hunt begins. So now we could show a line, let's say queen d2, hoping to get queen d4 check-in to win the rook here. Rook to f1, and now comes queen to d4 check, king to h1, queen to c3, just trying to get hold of the g3 square. King to g1, let's say f4 now, king to h1, g5, king to g1, and now queen to d4 check. King to h1, now comes queen to e3, king to h2, now comes king to d3. You also want to get the king into the game. Let's say you try king h1, king e2 now, the rook is under attack, rook to a1, and now king to f2. Let's say rook b1, now comes queen to d3, attacking the rook. Rook to c1, and now queen to e4. Finally, you threaten checkmate, you don't allow any checks on c2, and here you would force the rook to block with rook to g1, and now you just go king to g3. And now you have the ultimate zugzwang, where white has to start ruining his position, and he will soon get checkmated. Let's say h4, captures, and now any move that black makes with the rook ends in checkmate. Let's say rook a1, this is checkmate, but any other move would also end in checkmate. So it is a completely winning position for Carlsen, and without finding any solutions, we tried to find one for the rest of the game, and then of course his time ran out. So, like we said, after this, sorry about that. After this king to e3 move, Wei Yi lost on time, and Carlsen was able to get 7.5 out of 9 in this tournament, and he's the first player in chess history to break 2900 in rapid ratings. So here we have, first we're going to show the standings of the tournament. Here they are. As you can see, Magnus Carlsen in first place with 15 points, followed by Nakamura with 12, and Maxim Vachier-Lagrave with 11, followed by Wesley So, Ding Liren, Wei Yi, Sergei Karyakin, Veselin Topalov, Yan Nepomniachtchi, and Bassem Amin in last place with 5 points. And here I have prepared the live ratings. There you have it. As you can see, Carlsen in classical 2875.4, but in rapid 2903.0. So officially the first player in chess history to break 2900 in rapid. In blitz already 3 players have 2900: Carlsen, Maxim Vachier-Lagrave, and I believe Nakamura. Ding Liren at one point I believe also had 2900. Not sure about that. but I think at one point Dingliren was the highest rated blitz player in the world. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it and this short coverage of the tournament. I'm sorry I wasn't able to show more games as so many cool games are being played, but I'm not at my own home, so I'm really trying to make it possible to cover more games. But I will, for the games that you have requested, like Bassem Amin versus Nakamura, I will show it when I return to my hometown. So that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Bryce Foster, Michael Kella, Robert Kretschmar, Ralph Ricks, and Taras Karpiak for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon. Continuing this Cote d'Ivoire Blitz tournament that's going on today and tomorrow, and checking up on your suggestions when this finishes. We're returning to the Capablanca saga, and so on and so on. Thank you all. I will see you soon. Have an excellent rest of your Saturday.